a lot of this does come down to an ancient contract that was a part of marriage. And, this is one of the things that I've said that has gotten me in a lot of trouble. That's been a little on the controversial side. But I have told many couples, and particularly many men, I say this to lots of guys, you as the father are.
Hi, welcome to Jeremy Pryor's podcast, or what I like to call Jeremy Pryor Unfiltered. I'm his daughter and producer, Kelsey Gall, and we are excited to bring you seasons of content all the way from Tolkien to theology, from business to family. If you like to contemplate deep philosophical ideas across a wide range of topics, you've come to the right place. Make sure you give us a follow so you don't miss out on future episodes.
Hey, everybody, welcome back to the podcast. I'm here with my lovely wife, April, who's a couple rooms away. How's it going, April?
Good.
Happy 2025.
That's right. We made it through the Christmas season and the Happy New Year.
Man, so amazing to be in a new year. Yep. Still waiting for grandchild number 3 to arrive. So I did in a previous podcast a little bit of this guy, Dewayne, who's a part of this thing called Dry Creek Ranger School. And I was like, oh, I'd love to get April's take on this guy. He definitely looks like he's a blast from the past and Mr. Old School. But he said something about men that I've heard you, I think, articulate in certain ways before. I think you have a sensitivity to this that a lot of women, I think, don't. So I think this would be interesting. I'd love to get your take about kind of the inner battle that men face. And he's describing that. And I'd love to, get your take on this. Let me play this. And
what do you wish more women knew about how men operated?
There's 10,000 times more going on inside the head of a man than you have any idea. He's carrying burdens that you don't have a clue about, and he don't know how to express them, and he don't know what to do about it, and he figures if he puts it out there and communicates it, he's just going to be shot down, called a fool, called weak, so he carries it inside, and you have no clue the burdens and the hell that most men are carrying inside and not even showing you. I wish more women understood that.
Yeah, it's a strange problem, I think, of the modern discussion around men and why they're struggling. That a lot of the solutions that get put forward, a lot of the only acceptable solutions that get put forward are, if only you acted less like a man, all of your problems would go away. That men are treated like defective women as opposed to treated like work in progress men.
The average man, I believe, the average real man does not need to go get therapy for the battles and the burdens he's carrying inside. What he needs is for those that he's carrying them for to recognize that they're there and to respect it and to be grateful for it. They don't need to talk it out to get rid of it. They need the one that they're going through this hell for to recognize it's there and to be grateful that the man is carrying this for them. They don't need therapy. They need gratitude.
How important do you think it is to communicate that as a man? You've said there are 10,000 things, challenges, trauma, complete inability to communicate it, whether maybe you can communicate to a horse better than you can communicate it to your significant other.
Right.
What's your thoughts around vulnerability within a relationship? If you're not going to the therapist, perhaps.
Right.
How about opening up about these fears and concerns? And
well, first off, let's take away vulnerability. Okay? Because a lot of times men won't open up. They won't respond because it's looked at as becoming vulnerable. And it's like the little Dutch boy with his finger in the dike. It's a little tiny leak, but if I allow this little tiny leak, the entire dike is going to give way. That's why we can't allow the little tiny leak. Okay? So if I'm sitting here and if I'm one of these guys and my significant other is sitting there, I can communicate to her what I need to communicate without being vulnerable. I can maintain my strength and communicate to her. Okay? I can say, look, I'm working 60 hours a week, and the environment that I'm working in is very, very difficult. And I come home and I only have 8 hours here at the house, and this is the only place of peace I have in this entire world. And when I come home, you're angry all the time. You're not satisfied about anything. You want that, whatever the situation is. If you're not going to provide for me that little bit of peace, that this is the only place I can get, what are we doing? Now, you're not vulnerable. You're not getting walked on. You're not being a jerk. You're not coming in, throwing stuff down and saying this. You're just communicating. The hard reality truth is, our relationship at this point has boiled down to this. Now, you have a beautiful house. You never worry about there being grocery money. You have a car. I put the fuel in your car because you let it go to empty all the time. I provide this and this and this. And what I'd like for you is some peace and some understanding. If that's where your situation is.
So it's a lot of things that he said there, super sort of counter the current cultural moment that we're in. And I did a previous podcast on kind of his view on therapy and teased that out with a couple of guys. It was really good conversation. But a couple of things that he said there that I want to get your take on, April. So he's saying that, number one, what does a man need from his wife? And this idea that what he needs is to constantly express his sort of vulnerable fears and and all this. He's basically saying no. He needs gratitude from those he's going through this difficult. And he started by saying men have they are shouldering something that you as a woman don't really understand. Like there's something about this whole framing that does take me back like 100+ years. I think that what's really hard today in the modern world is that men are built for this. Men are built to go to war. Men are built to do dangerous jobs. Men are built to, just take on heaps and heaps of responsibility. And in the modern world, in the past, it always made sense for the man to do that because so many of the jobs were dangerous. So many of the jobs were physical. And so much of what was being protected in the home was a wife who's vulnerable, having babies, and needs to be provided for. In today's world, where women are out in the workforce, women are bearing a lot of responsibility in kind of white-collar jobs where they're putting their children in daycare. And it's all of this gets kind of weird and disrupted because this kind of way the man is built to say, I'm going to go and fight the battle. You're going to create this place of peace for me at home. And then what I need from you is gratitude and peace. That whole order of things is getting disrupted. And so, yeah, I'm curious, like, what was it that struck you about what he said? And how do we deal with this kind of the makeup of a man in a modern world where so many of these sort of gender roles are getting disrupted or upended?
Yeah. I do feel like that is what we're dealing with here in this conversation. It is another way that us moving away from role distinctions is affecting things. It's not just there's role distinctions in like our cultural society that have been, blasted as well. So it's not just the husband-wife role in the home, father-mother role. But in this context, I feel like this conversation, I just really agree with him a lot. And I feel like you and our experience has been riding that wave. Like he described kind of like our marriage, like I feel like I really had to grow and learn how to not be angry with you or just angry when you came home from work and somehow aiming everything at you. And then you would try to dream with me with like putting out a possible idea about something, not even a new business, just like something around the house, or maybe this idea of a trip or a decision about, the way we should spend something. And I would just get so, I would rain on your parade a lot. And I think when I look back, the perspective I have now is I think I just had a lot of fear. Fear really plays a big part in, I think part of being a nurturing woman is we're doing a lot of protecting and like vulnerable people. So like our kids are very vulnerable. There are times when we're very vulnerable in like childbearing and things like that. And so within that, there's a certain amount of fear that comes out. Like, what if this? What if that? We're playing out scenarios so that we're prepared for if that thing happens, or to prevent that thing from ever happening, or, so there is a certain amount of, I don't know if you'd say like healthy fear or something, like just like an acknowledgement of dangerous possibilities around you, without going all the way into fear. And so I think with the husband-wife relationship in that situation, a lot of times we're operating out of fear when we are reacting so strongly to our husband. And so I think I had an epiphany that helped me so much. And it was probably like maybe year 7, year 8 of marriage when, I mean, it's was slow in coming. And then I think it takes time for it to like unpack itself. But just this idea of like, oh, my husband is accountable to God for things that I am not accountable to God for. And he is, I believe, going to be, some version of before the throne. I don't know exactly what that's going to look like. Needing to give an account for his life. And I am a big part of his life. And so, am I making his job harder or easier? Like he's going to be before God, and is he going to have to be like, well, God, that woman you gave me. I mean, that sounds familiar, right? It's that kind of like in the garden. So I think that I have really been challenged by that to come back around on the same side of the table as my husband. And instead of always being on the opposite side, throwing out to him all the possible things that could go wrong, and letting us be together on the same side, facing the problems, listening without fear, listening without it feeling threatening. And but that is a dance. And I feel like, you have to learn how to maybe not tell me every idea you have. There is a certain amount of breaking it to me easily kind of a thing. I mean, that's kind of a joke in some movie themes and things like that, but it is kind of true. But that's part of the dance of us learning how to trust each other more, understand that we are different. We do have different skill sets. And, Proverbs 31 describes a man who has, what is it? Is it confidence in his wife at the gate? Like she does not put him to shame. And so I think that that's a really, like, I want to be that. I want to be someone that does not put you to shame. And then when you're at the city gates, which is an example of a man who's in leadership, an older man who's in leadership, when you're in those positions, that you are supported and not like being torn down.
Yeah.
Have you ever considered starting a family business so you can spend more time working as a family team? We've started a year-long coaching program called Family Inc., where you get weekly coaching with Jeremy, access to our video training for launching family businesses, and lots of ideas for businesses to start that are working for other family teams. Head over to familyteams.com and click Family Inc. to learn more, or to set up a strategy call with Jeremy to see if this might be a good fit for you.
Yeah, I think, April, you've done an amazing job at this. I mean, this is why I wanted to talk to you about this, because I think there's a lot of, I felt really supported. I do think that every year you got better and better at this. And I think that one of the things I feel so badly about for so many of the guys is that there's an ideology that is growing, that is making some wives get worse and worse at this, get less and less patience for their husbands. And I think the thing that I keep trying to understand, and a lot of this does come down to an ancient contract that was a part of marriage. And you see it all the way back in the garden. And, this is one of the things that I've said that has gotten me in a lot of trouble. So that's been a little on the controversial side. But I have told many couples, and particularly many men, I say this to lots of guys, you as the father are 100% responsible for providing for your family. Your wife does not bear 1% of the responsibility to provide. She is responsible to help you when you ask for help. But she's not responsible for carrying the burden of provision. And that burden means that when you look at the money in the account at the end of the month, you don't look at each other and say, well, you needed to bring in 40 or 50 or 60%, and I was supposed to bring in, 30, 40, 50, 60%, whatever you've decided. Like that new world where we share responsibility for provision, I see as fundamentally unbiblical. Like it's very clear in Genesis 3 that God said to Adam, like you are responsible for providing. Like it's through the sweat of your face that you will make a living from the earth. That is not told to the family team. That is not told to the husband and wife team. That is told to the man. And the wife has other things she has to deal with, right? That is described in Genesis 3. But the reality is, on this side of the Garden of Eden, God pronounced and gave this responsibility specifically to the husband. And that's not believed today. Now, I think the reason why I make that big deal out of that is because part of what Dewayne's describing here is you have to respect that. When your husband says, I'm going to take that responsibility 100% on my shoulders, then a wife's response to that is, oh my gosh, I want to help you. I want to respect you. Like, and there's this amazing give and take that happens in the relationship, in a marriage. But when you don't take on that responsibility and your wife takes on that responsibility, I think she loses respect for you. And this is a dynamic that is, I think, oftentimes undiagnosed as the root problem for the lack of respect. And in historical terms, when a father was out there, and you see this in like old books, like in Dickens books, or and certainly before that, you see this constant culture in families where Bob Cratchit's out there like doing whatever in the world he has to do to provide for his family, and when he comes home, the mother's just like, we are here for you because we know that you just took, God only knows what kind of hits for this family. And so we want to make sure that your Christmas Day is amazing or whatever. And it's just a really beautiful exchange that happens between a husband and a wife that's been totally decimated by these false beliefs that it's all some kind of equal thing, that we're both equally contributing to the same thing, as opposed to this being 100% on the man's shoulders, and then the wife helps him by creating that place of peace, sometimes helps with the business itself. Like that's okay. It's okay for her to do economically productive things. The problem is when as she starts to do economically productive things, that the responsibility then shifts to her shoulders, and she's literally carrying, the weight of that. That's the move that, to me, we need to resist. She can help, but she can't feel the weight of responsibility. When the money's not in the bank account, she should not be afraid and thinking, what am I going to do about that? I'm going to have to go to work. Like that needs to really fall on the husband. And that's the ground foundation for the respect that the family has for the father of the family.
Yes. And I think that we also play a role as the wives and mothers of turning the hearts of the children towards their father. So if I'm at home and I'm saying to my young children, well, I don't know when your father's going to get home, and he's probably working late again. And if I'm making some snide comments and like, well, I guess dinner's going to be cold, or I guess we'll have to wait. No, you can't eat because we have to wait for dad, or something like kind of negative. It casts a tone, as opposed to something where we could say something like, wow, I bet daddy's working so hard. He's working so hard to support our family. He's going to be so tired when he gets home. Let's make sure, maybe we can make him a picture, or let's make sure that the house is all tidied up so that he doesn't have to feel stressful when he comes home. And it's like a team thing, it's like a way that we as mother and young children can support dad. But the spirit of Elijah is when the hearts of the fathers turn towards their children, and then the hearts of the children turn towards their fathers. And we've talked about this before in other podcasts, but that's part of it is acknowledging the hard work that the father's putting in. And even if you as the wife think, well, it's not hard enough, or, you might have a lot of criticisms about how he's doing it, or if he's doing it well enough, or if he could do better, or, if there are some things about the way your husband works that is hard on you and like grates on you, it's important to try to focus on the positive side and find the things that are really good, and encourage him. Think about ways that that you can like lift him up, and things that he enjoys. Some women I've had conversations with, we've gotten really practical about like notes that you can leave him, or, noticing things you haven't noticed about him before, about a new favorite thing, or in making sure that it's always like it never runs out. You always have enough of that thing or whatever. So just making sure that you're acknowledging that the going out and the coming in need to be positive things. We want our homes to be a place our husbands want to come to, and not that a place that they like have to prepare to walk through the front door and kind of cringe and get ready.
Yeah.
We want them to be ready to kind of let down and feel welcomed and encouraged, because their job is huge. And I really, really like what the gentleman said on the video of like, yeah, there's 10,000 things going on in our heads that you don't know about. And sometimes it's like, I don't want to know. Like, I can't know. I know there have been seasons in our life where, Jeremy's taking on so many different things, or there's like maybe like a tense relational thing happening at work or something like that. And I'll know about it or that it's happening, but I am dealing with so much, just like with the kids and schoolwork and all this stuff. I'm like, yeah, I don't want to know that. Don't fill me in that. And so I'll know I can pray for these things, and I'll take it to the ultimate father. But just knowing that I don't have to I can't take on everything that Jeremy's taking on in the ways that he's taking them on. His shoulders have to broaden, and I have to pray for the Lord to really like, meet you there, and for me to be patient in the process.
Yeah, I think that he's a little bit on the extreme side in terms of the vulnerability. Like I definitely think that I like to share some things, but there is certainly a line. And his point that that for a lot of men to begin to show weakness can create like these breakages. I think this is what a lot of the greatest generation coming back from World War II, they were very quiet about what they went through, because I think they were so aware that they were badly traumatized, but they still needed to perform as men and provide for their families. And so these poor wives were, getting to hear their husbands, in the night, just like going through these horrible nightmares as their mind and body is trying to process all the trauma they experienced, and then getting up in the morning and going back to work and trying to provide for that family. And again, the respect that you have for men who are built to do that, like they're able to carry a lot. But there certainly is a limit. There's a limit, and there are times to be vulnerable. But I think that the thing that I keep coming back to is the ancient contract that created the respect in the home has been broken by the modern family. The ancient contract of the husband's job is to fully provide for the family. The wife is there to help him and to craft a place of peace as they multiply the number of children they have, and that he's constantly protecting the family from the things that would create that kind of devastation, the destitution that a family experienced historically when the father did crack or left or abandoned the family. And so he's like, I'm going to shoulder all of that and provide for you until all of these children are at a good place, and I'm going to provide for my wife for the rest of our lives. So that is worthy of respect. And I think there's something just inherently better about that arrangement. And I think it's biblical. So, all right, speaking of men like guarding and protecting the family. There's kind of a dark topic that got brought up in this podcast that I just was like, man, scratching my head about. Helen Joyce was on trigonometry, and she said some things I just was like, man, I really would need to process this. I want to get April's thoughts, because she talks about the importance of boundaries, and sometimes the importance of boundaries can be really confusing, especially for women. And I think, April, you have a really good kind of antenna for why that's important. But she kind of begins to articulate why I think this is critical. So I want to play this for you and get your thoughts on this one.
I'm loath to talk about this but I feel we have to talk about it because it's what's going on now. And then the fact that a lot of these people who created some of these ideologies had to pedophilic past.
Yeah.
And again, I feel uncomfortable talking about it.
But you're meant to feel uncomfortable talking about it. That's the point. You're meant to feel uncomfortable so you don't talk about it, so we don't do our child safeguarding.
Yeah, there's something she's about to unpack here that I think is critical. And what Frances was uncomfortable saying is that if you dive into the past of a lot of the actual academics who created a lot of the shifts in sexual ideology, you'll find crazy amounts of pedophilia in their past. And so this is part of the thing that Helen is going to kind of tease out here.
That's the way it works.
But so let's have the conversation. Yeah. So what's going on with that?
I mean, I don't think that paedophilia is a big part of any sort of motivation on trans specifically. The fact is that queer theory, this idea that boundaries are bad, innately suspicious things, and that we can redefine everything, and, we can turn the world upside down, that's very useful for paedophiles. So I think it's almost the other way around. This is an ideology that is useful for paedophiles, right, so it will attract them. So if you ever talk to a child safeguarding expert, they'll say to you that if you work with vulnerable people, and specifically vulnerable children, you have to be super suspicious minded, and you have to make that really clear to everyone, because if you don't, you become a beacon, which attracts the wrong people, because other people are being careful and you're not. So queer theories like that, it attracts the wrong sort of people, because in other places, there are people going, why does that bloke want to call himself a woman and get into the women's prison? Why does that man have this weird obsession with the fact that childhood is a, post-industrial Western concept? But in queer theory, they're like, oh, that's interesting. You're queering childhood.
Ugh. All right. This is, like I said, kind of a dark topic. But one of the things that she's describing here that I think is so critical, number one, that the reason we have really clear boundaries sexually is for children, is to protect the innocence of children. And so queering children, the kinds of sexual exploration that adults do that blur all the lines, it ends up really, really hurting children, making them more vulnerable. And then she's saying that you also have to be aware that if there is a certain percentage of people in any kind of culture that are struggling with pedophilia, they're just going to look around for wherever the boundaries are the most fuzziest. And if you're caring for vulnerable children and you don't have incredibly harsh boundaries, you're not very, she says, suspicious minded, then you're going to basically be sending out a beacon to attract those people to you. And so this often happens within any, and this is kind of like a world. I mean, for any of us who've done children's ministry or youth ministry, you always have to ask the question, why does this man want to serve in this ministry? And, oftentimes there's very good reasons, but sometimes, and every single time I've ever led a children's ministry or a youth ministry, I would discover sometimes years and years later that somebody that seemed extremely dedicated to the ministry for the right reasons actually had these struggles, and where it was playing out in some nefarious ways, sometimes very subtle ways and sometimes less subtle ways. So I'll let her finish the thoughts, and I'm curious to get your thoughts here.
Of course, in come the bloody paedophiles into that field. That's the way it works. Again, by no means everybody in queer theory is a paedophile. It's the other way around.
Well, you're making
the
opposite point. You're making the point is the
queer theory attracts them.
Attracts them.
Yeah.
So where are we getting these? Do you remember I can't remember, it was, I think it was in the course of the last year, we had this what was it called? The show in Bristol.
Oh yeah,
the family sex ed show thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have the lyrics I still remember.
Yeah.
I wish I didn't. I have a penis in my pants. Touch it, touch it, touch it, and all this kind of stuff. I can't open Twitter without some drag queen twerking her ass in a 3-year-old's face.
Yeah.
Like, where's all this coming from?
I mean, I don't think that most of the people involved in Drag Queen Story Hour are paedophiles. I think that they're very careless, and so there will be paedophiles coming in. But so why are they so interested in getting in front of children?
And why are the parents there just clapping this along?
So the getting interested in being in front of children is because of the Jesuit thing, give me the child until he's 7 and I'll show you the man.
Right.
Right. So if you want to teach children, if you want to teach people, if you want the world to think that male and female are arbitrary categories, start with kids. And specifically little kids are good for this because little kids do think that what makes you a man or a woman is your clothes.
Yeah.
Like a 3-year-old does think that. They think that if you take a boy doll and you dress it to be a girl, it becomes a girl doll. Now, actually, that's true for dolls because dolls don't have sexes. But you know what I mean? They think about people too. But by the time they're 6 or 7, they've worked out that it's the body. So interrupt that process and you've got people who will really think that trans women are women forevermore. And then just on a very pragmatic level, Drag Queen Story Hour means getting blokes dolled up to look like really, really hypersexualized parodies of women to come into schools and be called she in front of kids. Like, there's nothing better for preparing them for thinking that trans women are women. And then if you look at what they read as well, they read gender identity bullshit. They read all these stories about, you know, non-binary teddy bears and a dolphin who thought he was a boy, but he's really a girl stuff, you know. So it's actually indoctrination. That's why they're doing it. It's indoctrination. I don't think it's for paedophilic purposes, although I think it's an easy avenue for it. It's because it's indoctrination. Why do the parents do it? We're back to the virtue signaling, aren't we? I suppose it's very boring. I mean, you have a small baby, but it's very boring being at home as a mother with a toddler. Somebody wants to put on. Maybe you like to drag yourself.
Walk. Why do you have to take them to a Drag Queen Story Hour?
Well, maybe you like to drag yourself when you were in your teens or 20s or even maybe your 30s. I hate the bloody thing myself. It's just so boring. Like, it manages to be both boring and quite kind of terrifying at the same time, which is an amazing feat.
Look, drag is a legitimate part of the creative arts and always has been. And, you know.
But so suppose you were like in your 20s or 30s, like you had nice, you know, girls' nights out and you went to a drag bar and so on. It's kind of you're cool again, aren't you? And you're a cool mom. You're not like boring mom.
I suppose another way of looking at it is, you know, well, we go to the pantomime.
Yeah.
Well, dresses up as, you know, as a pantomime.
I haven't seen that much twerking at pantomimes. I'm not going to lie.
Have you heard of this? It's sometimes called the fallacy of the beard. So it's meant to be about where there are things that really are different things, but the boundary between them is fuzzy. So you've got somebody who is clean shaven and then you give them like 1 hair. Have they got a beard? No. 2 hairs. Have they got a beard? No.
When you're talking about me,
when you get to like, I don't know, I don't actually know how many hairs there are in a beard, but let's say it's 10,000. This person has a beard.
Yeah.
But there was no point in between where you know, where it was clear cut whether it was beard or no beard. So then somebody says, well, nobody has beards or everybody has beards. Like another example would be to say, you know, dusk. What's dusk? Is that daytime or is that nighttime? Oh, there's no day or night. So this is a bit of a long preamble to saying, yes, there's a bit of drag in pantos. Yes, there can be smutty innuendo. They're tertiary characters. It's a little bit of it. It's usually older men. It's very far away. They're not reading you bullshit about, you know, non-binary penguins or whatever the hell it is. In school, it's all of those things. It's right up close. It's only that. It's hypersexualized. There's no other storyline. It's not aiming over the heads of the kids at the grown-ups who just want to have a laugh at some dirty joke. So, you know, these are different things, even though it'd be hard to say where the boundary exactly lay between panto and drag queen.
So I think that one of the things I really appreciated about what she's describing is getting into the details about why is crushing these boundaries so useful if you want to completely change society. Defining things, creating really clear borders and boundaries around concepts is extremely useful when you are trying to protect children, when you have a design for society and believe that God created binaries for the sake of family, why male and female exists. But I think that there's a desire on the part of an increasingly growing number of parents, these mothers, to somehow demonstrate their progressive virtue by bringing their children to these things that are designed to dissolve all these boundaries. So yeah, I know that you've thought a lot about like the importance of boundaries and, you know, living through this kind of widespread acceptance that dissolving boundaries is somehow positive and that we all need to get behind it. Yeah. What did that start for you?
Well, it makes me think of that quote, stand for something or you'll fall for anything.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a world that I don't even really know how to directly respond to that video. But the idea of boundaries, or perhaps like I think I talk about it a lot as discernment. I think it's our job as mothers we need to have very discerning hearts. And usually that's in the context of the home and you're watching your kids interact with each other and one of them is, you know, having this reaction to this thing and you have to figure out why did they react to that? And you're kind of getting down to the bottom of things. And so we're discerning a lot about our kids' hearts just in their interactions daily. But then you also have to discern other people outside of the family who might have, you know, if you're questioning their intentions or their interests, you have to have your radar has to be up for those kind of situations.
The Family Plan Calendar is the new way to keep your family team organized. Plan your rhythms, menu, household chores, and notes for the family all in one place. Visit familyteams.com to purchase.
I don't personally have any desire to fit into the world or to be the cool mom. So I know that that is a concern for others. And I think that would be a slippery slope to go down. Because then you might compromise. You might find yourself compromising if it's important to you to kind of fit into what's happening in the world around you. But as believers, we're supposed to be in the world, but not of it. And so we have to constantly be, if we're not going to go sequester ourselves off in, like, you know, the country somewhere and never let our kids off of the property, you know, that's one extreme. But if we're going to be active in things and around and have neighbors and, you know, interact with people and let our kids participate in different things, we're going to encounter some stuff. And so we have to be prepared. We can't just hook, line, and sinker to swallow stuff. We have to say like, okay, nope, that's, you know, we've done things where we've started a certain type of program or a sport, and within, you know, a month or two, we've encountered some very uncomfortable mindsets and we're just like, done, out of here. We're pulling our kids out of this. So a lot of it is the discerning heart. And, you know, because we have the Holy Spirit as believers, he's who helps us discern. And so I strongly, strongly encourage people not to just take what the culture is shoving at you and just accept it and swallow it and, okay, I guess this is what we're doing now. Okay, I guess this is okay now, and almost become desensitized to the things that are happening around you. We have to stand up for what we believe. We have to remember what we believe by diving into the Word, the Bible, reading Scripture, memorizing Scripture, understanding it more and more, meditating on it day and night, teaching our kids as we're walking places and going places, and I mean, I think dealing with the world is a tricky thing, and figuring out how to handle those things and when you need to tell your kids about certain things. I know sometimes there's like a family member that has gone off the rails or is doing something inappropriate, and you have to kind of describe it. Like somehow you're telling, when do I tell my kid this thing? And so there's a lot of discerning in that regard as well. And I think that there is a temptation as parents to maybe overexpose our kids because we've gotten desensitized to something. You know, one kind of joking accusation I've gotten as, you know, our kids are ages 16 to 25 now. And one of them is like, what, your kids never saw this movie, fill in the blank, you know? And I'm like, well, have you watched it with the ears of like a 7-year-old? Like, I don't think you would let your little kids watch this either. Sure, they could have watched it when they were, you know, 17, 18, 20, 21, whatever, and they just haven't because it wasn't a thing anymore. But back when it was kind of coming out, or is the thing, like I just, so a lot of times people need to think of what the issue or the topic is, like from a child's perspective, and then protect them. Like it's our job to protect them from what I would call, unbiblical thinking. Like we are supposed to train our children up in the way they should go, and that's according to scripture. And all this stuff is just going off the rails with these, the drag stuff, and I don't really get.
Well, there is something so powerful about this move of dissolving all borders. One of the things that's really interesting about the Bible is that the foundation of creation, God is there making separations, creating categories in sort of the abstract, right? Light and darkness, male and female, land and sea. And so when you read Genesis 1 and just see God is a God who creates, separates, creates categories. And so what she was describing there at the end of like all the desire to dissolve all categories and to just kind of call into sort of some kind of philosophical question whether or not any categories actually exist. There is no such thing as day or night. This is an assault. It's really the unmaking of Genesis 1. It's pulling everything back. And I know I was struck once in Shabbat ceremonies within Jewish homes, at the end of Shabbat, they light a Havdalah candle, and one of the things that they say over the Jews as they're lighting the candle is, "Blessed are you, Lord God, King of the universe, who makes the distinction between sacred and mundane, between light and darkness, between Israel and the nations, between the seventh day and the sixth workday. Blessed are you, Lord God, who makes the distinction between the sacred and the mundane." And I think that part of what they're celebrating is a Genesis 1 reality, that we live in these rhythms and these categories, and there's something so important about humanity going in and out of rest and rest and work and in and out of these different categories. And that when there's clear boundaries and you can move from one place into the other, there's something like we're built for that. We're built for these different categories. One of the things I've mentioned to people is I don't think it's good enough to agree that the gender binary exists. You need to love the gender binary because it was created by God. Like, celebrate it. It's so good that there's a strong distinction between male and female, between darkness and light. Like, these aren't categories that we're like, yeah, I guess they exist in the real world, but wouldn't it be wonderful if we somehow could figure out how to dissolve them? Have you read Genesis 1? God created these different things to bless us. And he looked at them and said, it is good. It is good that these things are separated. It is good that the boundary lines are clear. And we live in a culture that says, no, it is not good. They're saying the opposite of what God says in Genesis 1. And that's why I think in these Jewish ceremonies where they're celebrating the distinction of categories, there's such ancient wisdom there to say, we not only need to acknowledge the truth of different categories, of boundaries between things, but celebrate the difference and celebrate that boundary exists and that it's clear. And then we get to teach our children where these clear boundaries are. That wisdom really comes from that ability to discern the clear distinction between categories. Well, thanks, April, for jumping on here. I know these are deep, tough topics to tease out, but I think super important. So awesome. We'll get back to it. But thanks for jumping on here today.
Thank you for listening to Jeremy Pryor's podcast. Make sure you hit that follow button so you don't miss out on any future content. Follow Jeremy on Twitter and Instagram, as well as his Substack blog, all linked in the description. See you next time.